Chapter 12. Rory sat beside Eliza Stevenson in the steam room of Seattle's beauty spa, her head leaning back against the wood. On her other side were Elle, Bella, and Catherine Stevenson. She was trying desperately to relax, but the tense morning she'd had with Gabe was making it impossible. They had been so close last night as they walked on the beach, but he had already started to pull away from her this morning. When she entered the kitchen to get a cup of coffee, he'd said a quick good morning, and then made a beeline to his office to do some work. Afterwards, when it had come time for her to leave, Gabe had simply said his driver would take her to the health spa. Her husband had given her a forced smile and sent her on her way. Rory sighed. Maybe all she needed to do was to talk to him. Then everything between them would be good again. It had felt so good that they were growing closer. She didn't want to lose what they had. Someone patted her knee, interrupting her reverie. "I'm sorry, what's that?" "I said this is perfect, my dear. I feel like my pores are getting the cleaning they've deserved for a long time," Eliza whispered beside her. "What about you, my dear? How are you feeling sitting here surrounded by all this heat and steam?" Rory grimaced and leaned over to Eliza. "This is my first time trying this, but I think I could get used to it. My skin feels so soft and moist." Eliza chuckled softly. "Well, we'll need to do this again, then. What do you think, Bella and Elle?" "I'm definitely coming back. This is perfect. It's so nice to have Jack at home taking care of our son." Bella sighed contentedly. "Mom, I could get used to this too, with baby number 2 on the way. I would love some time away being pampered like this." Elle glanced over at Rory. "You might feel the same way, Rory, once you have your first baby." Heat flew up her cheeks at Elle's words. "You might be right." Rory was already hot from the steam, so she hoped they wouldn't see that Elle's words flustered her. Staying married for real with Gabe and having babies was something she held on to only in her dreams. Gabe and her were only in a marriage of convenience. If someone would have asked her yesterday, she would have told them Gabe's kisses seemed to be an indication that there was hope that their fake marriage would become real after all. She had even dreamed of his kisses last night and woke up feeling happy that Gabe was opening up to her. This morning, however, there was a distinct chill in the air as far as Gabe was concerned. It seemed all the closeness they'd been building toward had melted. "It's too early to talk of babies, Elle and Bella. Rory and Gabe just married. Let them get used to each other first before you bring babies into the picture." Catherine spoke from her place on the other side of the steam room. "But that being said, you know Granddad and I and your mum are more than happy to welcome as many grandbabies into the Stevenson family as you want to give us." "I'll remember that, Grandmother." Rory was sure her cheeks were flaming red by now. All their talk of babies was only making her more flustered. She was relieved when the soft buzzing of a timer went off, signaling their time was up in the steam room. They each took a light shower and then applied cold towels to their bodies and met in the lounge room. They were going to have facials, manicures, and pedicures. Rory was once again seated beside Gabe's mom. Each of them had a female therapist who gave them a facial treatment. The cleansing cream felt wonderful on Rory's skin. After the treatment was finished, they each put cold slices of cucumber on their eyes and rested with their heads back on the lounge chairs. "So tell me, Rory, what's it like living in Gabe's great-grandfather's hunting lodge? It must be somewhat of a change from living in the cottage," Eliza whispered softly, her voice kind and soothing. "It's been going well. Gabe has shown me around the large place, and I'm starting to get used to it. It's especially helpful now that your son hired Mrs. O'Toole to be our cook. That's so good that you have her to help you. Gabe has been telling me how much he admires you," Eliza commented. "Really? He said that?" Rory was surprised. Gabe didn't always say what he was feeling, and it was nice to hear that her husband had nice things to say about her to his own mum. "Oh, yes. Whenever I talk to Gabe lately, he mentions little details of what you're doing. I can tell by his tone of voice that you are very special to him." If only that were really true. Even with Gabe's recent toe-curling kisses, Rory knew their agreement. This was a marriage based on convenience, not love. Gabe had made that quite clear from the start. but she couldn't help but be drawn to the warm and cozy picture Eliza painted of a couple that loved each other. Rory wished it could be true for them. Gabe has spoken of your talent for writing and that you've written quite a few romance novels. Eliza leaned over to whisper. I've already read 2 of your romance novels and I quite like them. Thank you for saying that, Mum. I'm happy you've enjoyed reading them. Rory couldn't help but smile. She was thrilled her own mother-in-law liked the books she'd written. My 3 aunts tell me they like my books too, but it feels extra special to hear it from you. You're a sweet girl, Rory, just like Gabe said. My son also told me that when you went to Argentina for your honeymoon, you helped to get a woman away from a man who was using her in his human trafficking schemes. Yes, well, that was Gabe's private investigator who discovered the man's background and had charges laid against him. But yes, Gabe and I had Maria as our maid in our room at the resort, and it was quite wonderful when she was finally freed from forced slavery to that man. Eliza expelled a breath, sighing heavily. I'm so glad you 2 were there. Her mother-in-law's heartfelt compassion reminded her that Gabe's mum had also been rescued from a terrible situation. Rory appreciated the new and unexpected closeness that was developing between them, born of shared experiences and compassion for others. Gabe also tells me you have contracted your work for harvesting sea plants to their family. Her mother-in-law shifted in her chair so she could see Rory better. Yes, I did. Maria says it's been very helpful for her family. But I'm not the only one who has helped Maria. Gabe was also very helpful in all of this, too. He was convinced of Maria's innocence and wanted to do what he could to help her. Gabe is the most kind and generous man I've ever known. Eliza chuckled softly. That he is. Gabe's been like that all his life. He's always done whatever he could to protect and help the innocent, and even more so after his father passed away. Her mother-in-law's voice shook slightly as she told the story. He would come to Walker's Island and do what he could to protect the animals and the people. One time there was a boat that got lost in the storm and ended up on the shore of the island. It was Gabe who found them almost drowned on the beach, and he helped the man and the woman get to the lodge. Gran told me later that Gabe was the one who cared for them, helping them to heal after their near-drowning experience. Rory could hear the pride and the glow of love in Eliza's voice as she spoke about her son. Gabe was quite shaken up by the incident, as I recall. He told me later it reminded him of what happened in middle school. Eliza sighed heavily before she continued. In middle school, Gabe hung around with his good friend Billy quite a lot during those years. But one year Billy was bullied into a dare by the popular boys in school. They wanted Billy to dive off a cliff into the rushing river below. None of them had ever dived there before, but Billy had always wanted to be noticed by the popular guys, so he went along with it. Gabe told him not to do it, but Billy dived anyway into those icy waters, and he died on impact. I didn't know that. I'm so sorry. It was hard on Gabe, and after his dad and Billy both passed away, those years were a really difficult time in his life. What happened to Billy's family? Rory asked. Gabe went to their house after the accident, but Billy's parents didn't want to see him, so he tried to talk to Billy's younger brother Danny. At first, Danny didn't want anything to do with him. He shied away from Gabe and only spoke when asked a direct question. In fact, Danny was mean to Gabe at first, saying he was convinced Gabe was going to abandon him and leave him just like everybody else did. But Gabe persisted, and eventually he and Danny became good friends, playing basketball and other sports together. Eventually, Billy's parents came round and realized that Gabe was a good guy and a real friend to their son. A knot formed in Rory's belly. Rory realized how much like Danny she was. She had been naive and innocent, in need of someone to care for her. Small incidents drifted to the top of her mind like the brushstrokes of a painting coming together. Gabe had always rescued the innocent. It's what he did throughout their childhood together, and now since he came back to the island. He'd married her to save her from the person who was trying to harm her. Is Gabe still friends with Danny today? The knot in Rory's belly grew bigger. afraid of the answer. Well, they're not as close as they once were, Eliza mentioned. Maybe Gabe got tired of Danny's prickly and fearful ways and lost interest in their friendship, Rory commented. Eliza sighed. As Gabe got into high school, he got busier, but they still continued to play basketball once a week. When Gabe started college, they drifted apart, each busy with their own lives. They have a passing friendship, but both Gabe and Danny have other friends now and have moved on with their own families. A strange chill swept down Rory's arms, settling in her stomach. She made every effort to hide her misery from Gabe's mum. All of her husband's wonderful and encouraging words to her had only been to make Rory feel better about herself. But the truth was, Gabe hadn't really accepted her as she was. Not really. To Gabe, she was a naive and innocent island girl who was helpless and needed to be rescued. Gabe didn't really believe she was the best thing that happened to him. Just like Billy's younger brother whom he rescued, Gabe would one day abandon her too. Memories of what she'd read last night in her mother's diary came back to haunt her. Edward and I have been married for 3 years now. There's still no child. I'm so sad about that. My biggest fear, though, is that my husband's attention has started to drift elsewhere. I saw lipstick on the corner of his shirt when I did the laundry yesterday, and he's not at home as much as he once was. I'm very afraid he's abandoned me for someone else. Rory continued to think about her mother's words from the journal. Her own father had drifted away from her mum, discarding her as not important. Rory's fears came tumbling back. She was convinced Gabe's interest would wander and his feelings for her would fade. Perhaps they already had. A deadness spread from Rory's heart down to the rest of her body. She was numb inside. It was like all her hopes and dreams for anything more between her and Gabe had been tossed aside. Somehow, Rory made it through the rest of their time at the spa, and did her best to enjoy the light meal and tea they had at Catherine's favorite tea place. Now we'll go shopping for tonight. Eliza called to her driver to pick them up, to take them to her choice of designer clothing stores. We'll stop here, please, Henry. I'll text you when we've finished shopping. I'll be waiting, Mrs. Stevenson. They walked along the boulevard and began shopping at a store that had quite a collection of Oscar de la Renta clothing. Rory followed Eliza down the aisle where the evening wear was located. Rory's jaw hung down as she looked at the prices. One dress cost 2 months' wages. While Bella and Al looked at the other aisle, a woman who worked there came to help them. We're looking for a beautiful evening gown for my daughter-in-law. Could you show us some ideas of what you think would look good on her? Eliza smiled at the associate and nodded at Rory. Of course. Follow me to the very special dresses. There are a few there I think will be beautiful on her. The lady had a slight French accent and seemed to glide across the store as she walked. Rory followed Eliza and the store associate, feeling a little intimidated by all the luxury that surrounded her. She'd never been in these high-end stores in her life, nor had she worn designer clothing. Being here in this store together with Gabe's mother, grandmother, and her 2 sister-in-laws made her realize how far apart their worlds really were. The lady from the store had a few dresses draped over her arm when she returned. And at Eliza's nod, Rory was shown into a spacious dressing room. Stepping outside the dressing room with each new dress she tried on, Rory watched her mother-in-law's expression for signs of approval. It wasn't until the last one that Eliza nodded. That deep purple color looks beautiful on you, Rory. The Venus off-the-shoulder tulle is a beautiful look on you, and it hugs your slim figure perfectly. What do you think, Rory? I think I've never worn anything so beautiful. I love it. Perfect. We'll take it then. Eliza Stevenson spoke decisively to the associate, who was eagerly waiting by the time Rory slipped out of the dress and into her walking clothes. Before long, everyone had bought their evening dresses and the accessories they needed. Bella and Al had also helped Rory find some wonderful designer shirts and pants in colors that enhanced her natural creamy complexion. As soon as Eliza's driver picked them up, they leaned their heads back against the car seat, very tired from their full day. Rory was happy to finally return to Gabe's condo. A As she walked through the door, all was quiet. Gabe wasn't back yet from wherever he'd gone to. It looked like any conversation would need to wait until tonight. Yes, I have a few conferences coming up where I'll be speaking. For all my trainings and the conference schedule, you can find it on my website. Gabe spoke to a few people who had seen his recent interview on the Winnie O show. He was about to share more details when his gaze was captivated by a woman looking beautiful in a deep purple gown standing in the middle of the room. It was his wife. Rory was a vision. Sorry, everyone. I need to go. There's someone I need to talk to. Gabe swallowed as he walked towards his wife. He had returned to the condo only a few minutes before they needed to leave. Gabe had spent the afternoon catching up with his brothers. Then as his driver drove them to the benefit gala, he had been so busy prepping for his speech that he'd all but forgot about his wife. However, the biggest reason he'd kept busy was because fear gripped him at how quickly they were becoming close to each other. It scared him. On some level, the intimacy that had begun with Rory during their week in Argentina had brought his deep-seated fears to the surface. An increased level of awareness flooded him that his new wife was chipping away at the walls he had carefully placed around his heart. Tonight, Gabe knew he needed to try to do what he could to fix things with Rory. You look stunningly beautiful, Rory. Sorry I got caught up in yet another conversation and left you alone. Gabe walked up to her and kissed her cheek. Large violet blue eyes widened as her gaze lifted to his. I understand, Gabe. A lot of people want to talk with you. Her forced smile and cool tone of voice convinced Gabe she really didn't understand at all. Rory, can we talk later? Sure. Tucking her hand under Gabe's arm, he led her towards a table near the stage where most of his family was seated with their hosts, Cyrus and Anna Noble. Rory, it's so wonderful that you're here. Eliza stood up and kissed her on the cheek. You remember Cyrus and Anna from your wedding? Rory held out her hand as she greeted them. Yes, of course. It's nice to see you both again. His wife smiled, nodding at his grandparents, mothers, and brothers and their wives. Gabe could tell she was nervous, and he lightly squeezed her hand to reassure her. They ate their meal together, bantering back and forth. Gabe sensed that Rory wasn't her usual self tonight. They would need to talk later. Soon Cyrus made his way onto the stage. We're here because we care about what goes on in our neighborhoods, our state, and our nation. We all want to give back. Many of us have had the privilege of aiding many causes like helping orphans and aiding the fight of poverty. However, tonight's gala, the donations will be to help victims of human trafficking. Someone who has recently been in this fight is here to share with you his story. Please welcome Gabe Stevenson. Thank you, Cyrus. Gabe shook his hand and stood behind the microphone. You're here because you want to end human trafficking. From recent experience, I can tell you it's a battle worth fighting. Gabe paused and looked over the large crowd that was gathered. Everyone was listening with rapt attention, and it inspired him to tell his story. Here's a little of my story of the battle we just fought against this horrible crime. My wife and I recently went on our honeymoon to a port town in Argentina. We thought we were going to experience an exciting adventure, but it turned out to be much more than that. My kind and compassionate wife saw that our maid Maria was fearful every time she would come to our room. One day Rory observed a man getting very angry with Maria, and she could tell our maid was very scared. When my wife asked her what was wrong, our maid didn't want to say anything, but my wife pressed her for answers. Maria finally told her she couldn't say anything because if she did, the man would hurt her family. Gabe shook his head and paused, looking over the crowded room. Most of us have not been in that position where we're forced to do something because if we don't, someone will harm our family. But Maria was, and because my wife persisted in getting answers, we found out the man's name. When the police looked up his records, they discovered that not only was he involved in human trafficking, but also in drug smuggling and other illegal activities. Now this man is behind bars, and Maria is safe with her family once again. Because you have given to this important cause, many more people like Maria will be set free to return home to their families once again. Gabe paused, letting the importance of his words sink in. Cyrus and Anna Noble, our host tonight, have chosen to give tonight's proceeds to the Stevenson Be Safe Foundation, which includes the safe house where we've been able to help many people who have been forced into slavery against their will. Our mission is to free them and help them get healthy and back into society. My own mother was a victim of human trafficking years ago, and my dad helped rescue her. My father has since passed away, but like my mom always tells us, she imagines her husband looking down from heaven with a smile lighting his face tonight telling us, "You've done well." And you have, all of you. Thank you for joining with us in supporting this cause. Loud clapping began, and people stood to their feet. Gabe stepped off the stage and walked towards his family's table. People shook his hand on the way back, telling him that his words helped them have greater understanding and compassion towards victims of human trafficking. It seemed to have struck a chord with people at tonight's benefit, and for that he was grateful. "You did well, son." Granddad thumped his carved wooden cane at his side. "You've made me tear up, Gabriel." Grandmother pulled out a tissue from her purse and dabbed at the corner of her eyes. Gabe reached down to kiss her cheek. "Son, you always make me so proud." His mother hugged him, and his brothers gave him good-natured fist bumps as he passed them, walking towards his own seat at the table. Gabe sat down beside Rory and looked at her and whispered, "Well, what did you think?" Gabe couldn't believe he was more nervous to hear his wife's response than he was to speak in front of a room full of people. "You did really well, Gabe. Your words touched a lot of people. I'm very proud of you." Her violet blue eyes misted with tears as she spoke softly. "Thank you, Rory. I needed to hear those words from you most of all," Gabe whispered in her ear, pleased when a blush stained her cheeks. In spite of the warmth that flooded him at his wife's encouraging words, Gabe's regret of the evening was that he wasn't on the receiving end of Rory's beautiful smile. He needed to figure out how to bring it back. "If you'll excuse me, I need to go to the little girl's room," Rory whispered to Gabe. He was in between conversations with one of his brothers. "Of course, Rory." Rory walked into the washroom, glad that it was quiet. Thoughts swirled round and round in her head of Gabe's kind words about her when he'd talked tonight. But just as quickly her thoughts returned to his mother's words of how her son protected the naive and innocent. Being here tonight with all these well-dressed society people, Rory had an even greater awareness of how unsophisticated she really was. Returning to wash her hands, she sighed, looking forward to the end of the evening. Maybe she was just tired and overthinking things? Without warning, the door opened and a woman walked into the washroom. Rory caught a glimpse of a low-cut evening gown with a slit that was cut high up to the top of her thighs. Without an introduction, the woman spoke. "You came here tonight with Gabe Stevenson." Her green eyes flashed, waiting for an answer. "Yes, I did. I'm his wife." Rory was about to introduce herself, but the woman in front of her continued talking almost without taking a breath. "I'd heard that Gabe married. I didn't think he'd actually do it." There was an unfriendliness to her tone that made Rory wary. "You're certainly not model material, which makes me wonder what he saw in you. Where are you from?" I grew up with my 3 aunts on Walker's Island." This conversation was beginning to feel more like an interrogation than a conversation. Rory continued to grow more uncomfortable with every passing minute. Yes, I've heard about you from friends. They told me Gabe married a poor island girl with no class or culture." She shook her head from side to side, red hair swaying with every movement. "Well, you won't stay married to Gabe for long. He needs a woman who can help him get to the top, not drag him down. Gabe needs a woman with a lot more to offer than someone like you could possibly give him. Don't worry, when he finishes with you, I'll be there waiting." Rory stiffened from the insults hurled at her. "What did you say your name was?" The woman glided toward the door, opening it, and turning suddenly before she left. "Maddie Winslow." The door closed with a soft ticking sound, like the sound of a clock that was running out of time. The sound served as a reminder that her time as Gabe's wife was coming to an end. Rory tried to ignore the inkling of doubt that sat heavy in the pit of her belly. As she continued to think, she realized the worst part of it was that Maddie Winslow was right. She lacked all the culture and sophistication that her husband needed in a wife. She didn't have charm or the model-like beauty that her husband needed in a wife. She didn't have the right pedigree and family connections that her husband needed in a wife. Rory's brow puckered in worry. She wondered how long it would take before Gabe realized it, too.